If a picture does indeed say 1,000 words, then the visage of New Jersey Governor Chris Christie standing behind Donald Trump could be turned into volumes rivaling the Encyclopedia Britannica. This is now a Trump GOP, and there is nothing they can do to stop him. But wait a minute. Let's not fall into lockstep with those who have already anointed the man with the silver spoon and the tart tongue. Let's ask if he is really inevitable, or if his rhetoric can be stripped away in time to save the Republican Party. Or should we even care if the Republican Party is salvaged? Why not let it plow itself into the ground and maybe emerge a stronger and more dedicated version of what it was founded to be? And if that should be the case, let us not forget those who brought the Republican Party where we are today and who have no clue what being a Republican means. I will stoke that fire in telling it like it is. So break out the lighter fluid and the matches, kids. I'm Ed Berliner. This is The Hardline for Wednesday, February 2nd, 2016.
I think if somebody is doing as well as I'm doing, and I'm not just speaking for myself, whether it's me or anybody else, but if I'm going to win 5, I've already won 5, but maybe it could be 6, 7, 8, 9, could be 9, could win 9 states tonight. If I'm going to win all of these states with tremendous numbers, and if I'm going to come in the worst is second in the 2 or 3 that I might not win, I think, we're a democracy. I think it's awfully hard to say that's not the person we want to lead the party, right?
We're here, America, on March 2nd, 2016, right where we deserve to be. Because after all, does not one receive the life and consequences they deserve by their own actions? That being the case, I would dare anybody to argue. The Republican Party finds itself in full revolt, scheme upon scheme to stop whom some believe is the inevitable. And soon others will be lining up right behind the newest lapdog to bathe in the glory of what and who is Donald Trump, because those same Republicans who wheeze about him, and they are the ones who created him. And there's nothing they can do to stop him from grabbing the presidential nomination in November. Whew. Start the conversation right there in the wake of Super Tuesday. Let's welcome back the senior contributor at the Federalist, D.C. McAllister, to see if we can make some sense of it all. All right, D.C., it's just you and me, and let's go at it because we got a lot of ground to cover here. Right from the top, have we now seen the death of what is conservatism in the United States under this generation?
No, and the key term there is conservatism. We may very well see the death of the GOP, but it probably needs to die. If it's not going to return, like you said, to the roots of what it is supposed to be standing for, limited government, pushing back against the progressive agenda. It has abandoned its root calling, and people have risen up against it because they've sent people there to Washington to represent them and to limit government and to reduce the size and scope of it, and they either haven't done their jobs, they become corrupted by the system, or there just isn't enough of them to do it, and they haven't been able to change minds. And we can even name the people who are in Washington trying to fight for that. Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Rand Paul come to mind. And, these are the people standing for the principles of limited government. And the GOP has time and time again opposed those changes. They've been for the status quo. And so the GOP is being attacked because it has not represented the people. And the people have revolted. And the sad thing is that conservative principles have been lost and been melded in the establishment mold. And so the people who are for Trump are also saying, hey, conservatism is dead to me. It hasn't done what you promised, but it never had a voice. It's never actually been implemented. It's never been stood for and fought for. And if the GOP wants to survive, and if the GOP wants to be better because of this and really learn from the mistakes that it's made, it needs to return to those limited government principles and say, we hear you and we're going to make real change.
DC, everything you have said is right on the dime. However, I'm going to come back at you with this. When you talk about limited government and conservatism, let's be honest here. Let's go through 5, 10, 15, 20 years where people who believe in conservatism have been voting for men and women, sending them to Washington, the men and women who say, don't worry about a thing. I'll care for conservatism. I'll get it done. I'll push it forward. Yet when they don't do it, they come back. We vote them in again. When they come in and don't do it, we vote them in again. It's the same thing over and over again, D.C. We can sit here and we can blame the politicians in Washington. Boy, I get fired up about this. This is one of my favorite topics of all time. But it still comes down to personal responsibility of the voters and the citizens of the United States, yes or no, that keep putting these clowns back in the car every single cycle.
I agree, even though it hasn't been that way across the board. I mean, they've
No,
certainly
no,
put
no,
some-
not across the board. Not across the board.
Yeah.
You're right. There are those that you mentioned who've done it. I'm not talking about everybody, but let's be honest. If the conservative principles have not been pushed through by now, it's got to be the fault of the people we keep sending to Washington.
I don't think they've really understood the message of what conservatism is. They don't understand what limited government really means. And also they're tied to their entitlements. And there are things that they have pet, things that they really want to keep. And, we haven't really explained to them the principles of limited government and what that means. And it doesn't mean not caring for people. It means reducing the size and power of the centralized federal government and putting power back in the states and with local governments where it belongs, and so that the people who are closer to their governing authorities can have a voice. That's what it's about. It's not about stripping people of their safety nets or not caring for them, but it's about actually putting power back at a more local level so that people have a voice and that you can actually have something to say when these things go wrong in Washington or in your state capitals. I just don't think that the message has been sold to the people, and they've gotten used to just the status quo themselves.
Then let's talk about selling that message, if you will, for a moment here, because the people selling the message are the insiders, the veteran politicians, the establishment, if you will. Here we have Donald Trump, who looks as if he is on the way to the nomination. Mitt Romney, who couldn't become president himself, failed a couple of times, as a matter of fact, to try and get there. He's going to hold a press conference tomorrow in Utah, and people are even saying, Mitt, run, Mitt, get in there. But wait a minute, D.C., this is no disrespect to Mitt Romney whatsoever. I happen to respect the man quite a lot for a lot of the work that he has done. But in the same breath, he's the establishment. How can the Republican Party hope to gain people back, grab them, bring them back in, and make this a party that people want to be a part of again, and or defeat Donald Trump if that's what they want to do, if they keep bringing back the same old faces?
They're not going to. And even their rally around Rubio, who's not completely establishment, he has some conservative credentials, not as much as Ted Cruz, it hasn't worked because they have their stamp on him. And people are just like, we don't want the establishment choosing our candidate for us. Really, until the GOP actually says we're going to stand for something that the people really need and want, which is limited government, the people aren't going to listen to them. And the problem with this is that you have a whole group of people supporting Donald Trump now who think that conservative principles are the problem because it's been aligned with the establishment and they haven't been really explained to what's been going on in Washington. And so they're rejecting it all and following Trump. What we need to do is make the case for conservative principles and try to get people away from Donald Trump, move them over, and actually make a stand for what we believe in.
But the people don't want to move, D.C. The people haven't they already stated quite frankly enough, we don't want to move. There's nothing you can say that will convince us.
Well, they may not want to move right now because they're caught up in the wake of Donald Trump and these big promises. But I think we need to give them a very clear choice. And I guess that's what I'm saying, is that they're heading toward Donald Trump because they feel hopeless and no one has spoken for them, not even the conservatives. And they're lumping us in with the establishment. But see, as long as conservatives are tied up in the tangled web of establishment politics, they're not going to have a clear message. The conservatives need to step aside, step out, and say, this is what we stand for. This is what our country needs in its fight against progressivism. We need to give all those people who are, when Donald Trump doesn't work out or they get disillusioned with him, they're going to have a home to come to. They're not going to want to go to the establishment. Give them a home. Give them those real clear conservative principles in a place that they can come home to, that they can fight for, actually fighting for liberty.
Then who will give that to them, D.C.? Who gives that to them now? Because Ben Carson is out today. John Kasich is hanging on to try to get to Ohio. If he wins Ohio, that might stop Donald Trump. Marco Rubio has only won one state now. If he gets to Florida and wins there, he might stop Donald Trump. But let's get to the matter of things here. Who is that person then? Because I talk to people who say, wait a minute, if you're going to give me a choice between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, I don't know if I want to make that choice. There's a lot of people frightened with that.
We need to clear away the personalities, because it's not just about this election, the conversation you and I are having. It's not just about this presidential election. It's about the principles that make our country strong and that really make our country great and that we actually need to get back to.
Then who is that?
Well, right now, as far as the presidential candidate in this election, Ted Cruz, and everyone would agree that he actually stands for limited government more than any other candidate. I mean, even people who don't like him will say that. So my point and my plea and my appeal to the people is choose principles, not personality, and choose for the long term. This is about changing America. This is about making a stand on principles. You may not like all the little details about this one person, Ted Cruz, but he stands for the principles that we actually need to fight the real enemy. Who is the real enemy? The real enemy are people who want government to become so big that you have no freedom left. And we need to fight them. Who has the actual answers to fight that agenda?
Okay, I'm going to go with that. I got about a minute left here, but I want to focus on real enemy then. If people are Republicans, conservatives, if they want to vote that way, and if they want to defeat the real enemy, which obviously, in the eyes of Republicans, is Hillary Clinton / Bernie Sanders and the Democrats, then how do you get them to take that personality out of it, D.C.? They don't want to. And the other part of that is it just possible, that Donald Trump is the guy who can unify the party and make everybody angry enough to defeat the enemy?
I don't think he can. I think you see that evident right now. There's so much anger, and people are saying, I'm not going to vote for Trump, even if a Marxist gets in the White House. Are you kidding? I mean, this is how angry people are. So this whole election is driven by emotion. We need to have a group of people stand up and say, let's put the emotion aside. What do we stand for? And let's look toward the future and really make the case of conservative principles to people, because that's what's going to save us.
Is it possible that they can derail Donald Trump, though? 30 seconds.
I don't think so. Not if he continues on the way he is, and as long as Marco Rubio is in the race, and the muddled waters of conservative principles and conservative views are with the establishment. People aren't going to have a clear choice, and I think that he's going to plow through.
And it looks as if the Trump supporters are going to be very happy. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but believe me, this is at least a 6-hour-long conversation. We're going to continue in pieces heading towards that convention. D.C. McAllister, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Your next chance to make that decision is going to be the debate in Houston on Thursday. That's where we now have 4. Ben Carson's out. We're down to 4. Our post-debate special begins right here on Newsmax and Newsmax.com, Thursday, 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific time. Is it possible that a group of people from one state out of the 48 on this continent know better than everybody else about the election? Next.